Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, Adivos Radio. So today, we're going to be having a look at a deck which is frankly crushing in Japan. Now, you know on this channel, I bring you a whole bunch of Japanese deck lists. I like to show you decks that are doing well, but these are decks that are winning tournaments here or there. When I say a deck is crushing in Japan, I mean it's seeing a huge amount of success and a huge amount of play. The lovely David Hockman was over in Japan this past weekend playing in a tournament. He played the amazing Gyarados. Here's his list. It was amazing. It was so much fun. He said he wanted to win a game. He went 3-2, big up David. But he said that there were only really two decks that people were playing successfully. And that is Pikachu and Zekrom Tag Team GX. We have looked at this deck before, but I'm going to bring you an updated list in the very near future. And Sylveon and Gardevoir Tag Team GX. Now, just very quickly, this deck, or this Tag Team GX, will not be in Team Up. It's not in that set. It is going to be in Unbroken Bonds, which will be our May set, but this card is doing a huge amount of damage in the Japanese metagame. It is absolutely crushing. So the question, I suppose, is, what does it actually do? Well, the first attack is exceptionally uninspiring. What it does, for a single colorless energy, you get to search your deck for 2 fairy energy and attach them to your Pokemon. It's fine. I mean, look, Tag Team GXs don't all have a third attack, so to speak. So in that regard, it's alright. But the main attack here, the one that we are very excited about, does 150 damage for 2 fairy and a colorless, and lets you move all of your fairy energy around the board as you like. And I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really, really good attack. Because essentially, the way you play this is doing 150, which is largely not going to actually get a KO on very much. I mean, if you're against some of these non-GXs like Granbull and White Kyurem, fine. You're going to be getting a one-hit KO. But generally speaking, this is kind of a 2-hit KO attack. You can always add a choice band on there and turn it into a one-hit KO attack, but even then, you've got a few GXs like Blacephalon and Tapu Lele that will go down. But there's plenty more like Buzzwole, Zoroark, etc. that you're just not going to be KOing. So for that reason, you kind of treat it like a 2-hit KO attack. But you use Ace Roller, and what you do here very simply is, you attack and you do 150 damage. If you are sure you're going to survive next turn, great. If you don't think you're going to survive next turn, then you move all the energy to a bench Sylveon and Gardevoir Tag Team GX, and then you Ace Roller to pick up your Tag Team GX, put a new one active that's got the energy, and essentially you loop this saying, you know what, you're probably not going to be able to get a one-hit KO on me, so you're not KOing me. Now, there are a couple of tricks, because again, this isn't the biggest, baddest Pokemon ever. This isn't a Magikarp and Wailord with a brawny pads attached, but don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we've got other tricks. But essentially here, you're always hitting for 150 damage, and you've got Ace Roller ready, so if your opponent isn't one-hit KOing you, they're not KOing you. And you've got plenty of things like Pal Pad, for instance, and Lusamine that can be used to recover those Ace Roller if you feel like you're running a little bit short. Well, hang on a second, 150 damage is fine, but it's not exactly some huge powerhouse number that's gonna crush the entire format. An Ace Roller's good, but isn't your opponent just gonna do something like Guzma and KO one of your benched Pokemon? For instance, the Pokemon to whom you move the energy when you attacked. There's no point using an Ace Roller to heal your active if your one on the bench with all the energy on gets KO'd. Well, that's where Ribombee comes in. I did a video the other day telling you about how Ribombee is great and should be seeing a huge amount more play. And a few people agreed with me and a few people disagreed with me. Probably a few more disagreements than agreements, but the fact of the matter is, it is seeing a lot of play in Japan now. And the reason is very simple. Rabombi's got a great ability, which says that as long as it's on the bench, you prevent all effects of supporter cards done to your fairy Pokemon in play. That means that you cannot have your fairy Pokemon Guzma up. Now, if you've got something like a Tapu Lele on the bench, then your opponent can Guzma and bring it into the active. If you've got something like a Dedenne, which is legal in Japan at the moment and seeing a bunch of play, your opponent can Guzma and KO it. But if all you've got on the bench is Rabombis and Gardevoir and Sylveons and maybe some other fairy Pokemon, then your opponent cannot Guzma. They have to go after your Sylveon and Gardevoir in the active. Now, I know you're evolving from Cutiefly, and I know that Cutiefly has got fairly low HP. But here's what's ridiculous about this combination here. Your opponent can KO 2 Cutiefly, and it doesn't matter. Because if they KO 2 Cutiefly, they take 2 prizes. You then force them to take out a Sylveon and Gardevoir, because the second you get a Rabombi out, they've got to take your active on. Okay, that's not strictly true. If they play an escape rope, they can take one on your bench, but you get a choice, so just make sure you've got one on your bench you don't mind taking a hit. And they could play something like Pokemon Catcher, or Counter Catcher, or Custom Catcher, and that would allow them to bring a Pokemon off the bench and go and get a KO. But to be honest with you, there's very few decks that are playing that. And then Counter Catcher, they've got to be behind on prizes. Custom Catcher, they've got to have both in hand at once, etc., etc. So even if they take out a couple of Cutiefly, then they take out a Gardevoir and Sylveon, they're still going to be 1 prize away from winning the game, at which point you can just whack up another Tag Team GX that gives up 3 prizes and go, ha 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 ha. I don't care if technically 1 prize wins you the game, you've got to take 3 prizes to win the game, because again, no Guzma, they've got to have what is in front of you. Now, what is kind of interesting, all the Cutiefly have 30 HP, which is very, very, very awkward. But we have, for the time being at least, until the rotation in September, we've got the Sun and Moon Cutiefly, 1 Fairy Energy, 10 damage. If any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks during your opponent's next turn, flip a coin if heads prevent that damage. So you've actually got a 50-50 chance of not getting KO'd anyway. Although, like I've said, it's not necessarily the biggest problem ever, given that, like I've said, 2 of them can go down. It doesn't really get your opponent any closer to winning the game, which is kind of hilarious. So essentially, you force your opponent to take on your Tag Team GX by using Rabombi to make sure they can't use Guzma, and then you ace Roller to stop them getting KOs. Now, the less important part, but still a very important part here, is using Fairy Charms. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Fairy Charms are actually seeing play in Japan. It took a while. I told you sooner or later they would be good, and they are. And now, according to David, there are 2 of these Fairy Charms that are primarily seeing play. The first one, fairly obviously, is Fairy Charm Lightning. I told you that the 2 big decks in Japan at the moment are Sylveon and Gardevoir, and Pikachu and Zekrom. Fairy Charm Lightning prevents all damage from EXs and GXs done to the fairy Pokemon to whom this is attached. So you attach this, and your opponent can't actually do anything with Pikachu and Zekrom. So, gutted. The other one is Fairy Charm Ability, which stops damage from Pokemon that have abilities. And I told you that some of the Pokemon that are good against Tag Team GXs are things like Rayquaza, although it's weak, so maybe not the best against this. Gardevoir. Well, they've both got abilities. Not to mention Zoroark is still an amazing Pokemon. Lycanroc with his GX attack can go and get KOs. All of these are stopped. What's really interesting, these are the 2 Fairy Charms that came around in Night Unison, so they're the 2 most recent ones and the 2 that are largely seeing play. Now, one thing that people would often say here is, well, hang on a second, can't your opponent just use Field Blower here? Well, that brings me to the final part of the combo, and that is Sylveon and Gardevoir's GX attack. Now, Sylveon and Gardevoir's GX attack is for free energy, and it does 200 damage. So this is kind of the one time in the game where you can probably rely on a big one-hit KO, though not against a Tag Team GX. But actually, what you do here, if there are 3 extra energy attached, so 6 in total, your opponent shuffles their entire hand into their deck. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is phenomenal. Because now imagine you get this GX attack off, and look, it's expensive and blah, blah, blah. Maybe you even have to use the first attack to get the energy going. Maybe you use the first Gardevoir and Sylveon, you use the first attack to power up one on the bench, and then you switch them when you've got enough energy on. Because if your opponent literally has no cards in their hand, they're not likely to draw into that field blow, and they're not really likely to draw into anything. So now we are forcing them to take down Sylveon and Gardevoir because of Ribombee. You're ace rollering if they can't one-hit KO. You're blocking some of the most powerful Pokemon in the game from actually being able to attack you, and you're giving your opponent a 0-card hand. If you get this up and rolling, you just don't get beaten. It's essentially invincible, which is probably why it's crushing in Japan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the best decks, and I don't have a deck list for you at the moment, though I'm sure I will get one very shortly, and when I do, I will happily share it with you. But this is how that deck works, and ladies and gentlemen, it's just a little bit nuts. But I would very much like to know what you think about this particular deck, so do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, but please do remember the most important rule as always: be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays. We've had some exclusive Transformers reveals lately, and that makes me very excited indeed. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.